I love challenging material. I love how a lot of new Jump series are trying to be innovative and tackle very atypical subject matter and try and explore new things. And I love seeing authors like evolve in their newer works and like kind of broaden their horizons in terms of what they want to write and how they write it. I think Astra Lost in Space is a great example of that in terms of an evolution of Kenta Shinohara's writing style from Sket Dance, and I want to explore that a little further. Yeah. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you a few questions, Marlene, because we don't usually have a lot of industry guests on the show. And whenever we do, we want to like just ask them some questions about their background and kind of learn a little bit. And so we have a few questions that we just wanted to ask to get a sense of what a manga editor's job and what a life as a manga editor is kind of like. Mm-hmm. But to start off, we wanted to ask how you got into reading manga. Like, what do you find most appealing about the medium? And I'm going to take like a guess that one of your first manga was Inuyasha, since you brought it up before.
Well, I think I said that in like another interview, so you might... Did you hear it from that one?
I admit that I have read that interview.
Okay,
so.
Yeah. Yes. No, I definitely said that in another interview. So actually my very first anime with the knowledge of what anime is, if that makes sense. So like obviously like I grew up with Pokemon, I grew up with Dragon Ball, like it was like you wake up on Tuesday morning in like second grade, and, like, you wake up at 6:30, you watch Dragon Ball, you watch Pokemon, and then you get ready for school, because school came after Dragon Ball and Pokemon. Stay in school. And so, you, like, I don't know, like, I guess around maybe, I don't know, 3rd or 5th, somewhere around there, like 3rd, 5th grade, I was at a sleepover, and kids being kids, you didn't really watch TV after, like, 9 p.m., and it was like our first time ever like turning on Cartoon Network at 2 a.m. And we saw like what was Adult Swim at the time, and like Inuyasha was on, and here am I like, oh man, this is really cool. And like the other girls are like, this is so scary, let's change the channel. I'm like, you guys are voices. Like here I am, like this 10-year-old, like you guys need to calm down. It's not that scary. It was really cool.
Well, some of those monster designs were pretty creepy, especially earlier on.
Like, I was exposed to the Alien ride at Disney World when I was 3, so there's nothing scarier than that. So yeah, that was like my first anime, and then there was actually a girl in my 5th grade class who brought in a manga at the time, I think, All My Goddess. Yeah, it was All My Goddess, which, like, you don't really expect a 5th grader. Like, as an adult now, I'm like, oh man, like, what was a 5th grader doing with that? But yeah, so that was like my first physical manga reading that, because I'm like, oh, that art is really cool. And then like after that, like Fushigi Yugi, and then like whatever my grandma bought from Barnes and Noble. And then as I got older, I'm like, oh, here's the anime. That's Toma. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It's the same ball too. It's the same ball from that Twitch stream. It's
well, clearly Toma has something to say.
He likes manga.
What's his favorite manga?
Probably Blue Flag.
Oh.
He's probably biased, though.
I was going to give an easy answer, like Junji Ito's Cat Diaries or something.
No, that's Coco's favorite manga.
Okay. My mistake.
Sensei's favorite manga is, oh my god. Toma, please.
This is why I like Blue Flag. It's really cool.
It's really sad, actually. It's not cool. It like breaks my heart.
But I'm named after one of the characters, so I like it.
Okay, I took it away. Now he's looking at me like he's offended.
Aww.
And then actually I have a cat named Nyanko Sensei, so you can guess what cat he's named after. Eat the dinosaur, buddy. And so, yeah, pretty much like, oh my goddess, wow, we got off track. Oh my goddess, Fushigi Yugi, and then like, bookstores, found more and more, One Piece, Kenshin. I was going through my room last time I was at home in New York, and I found like this old, I feel bad calling it old, but it was like this old, like, maybe second print run of like One Piece volumes, whatever, and like the translator was Andy, and I'm like, oh, I know that person. So yeah, no, like I've been reading manga for a long time. Oh my god, it's not the ball, it's my face. Oh god. And so yeah. That's how I got into manga, and what I found really appealing about it is, like, you got American comics or American cartoons, and, like, a lot of it's episodic. It's, like, clearly made for kids, and, like, that's not a problem. I watch Ladybug. I'm, like, 25, and I'm watching Miraculous Ladybug. And, like, I watch, like, kids shows all the time. I watched that Lego show on Netflix with the fairies.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah.
I mean, it's okay. Like, I love stuff like on Crunchyroll, I watch a lot of, like, Shonen Ashibe and Bono Bono and all that stuff. I like kid stuff like that, too, so.
Yeah. So a lot of, like, American cartoons are very, like, episodic. I really like the idea of, and it was new to me because I liked reading books. Surprise, surprise.
Don't say.
And, yeah, right? And so it was surprising to me to see, like, even like a TV show, because you got, like, American live action TV too that's also episodic. Surprising to see a TV show or, like, a book or a book series rather, that was so extensive, and it was one of those mediums where it was, like, a lot of potential. The potential for good storytelling is, like, endless. So that's what really, like, attracted me to it. That's what I thought was incredibly appealing about it, and that's the reason I still read it today. There's always something new.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome. It's really interesting that you were reading, like, One Piece volumes edited by Andy, and then, like, years later...
he was the translator. He was not the editor. He, like, translated it, so I don't know what Viz was like back then, or what Andy was doing back then, but... Yeah, like, I now actually, like, I've looked at a lot of my older copies of manga just to see, like, oh, who edited this? Because a lot of American fans, I'm not sure, actually, like, will look at the credits page all too often. And I know I didn't. Like, I didn't really think to.
Yeah.
So.
I'm willing to guess that Viz was definitely a smaller company back then.
Probably a little smaller, but still pretty big, because that would probably have been during the boom of when they were putting out, like, Shonen Jump, the magazine. Yeah. And then, they were, like, bringing over a lot of, like, Shonen Jump titles. And I remember, like, you know, looking at the front of, like, any given, like, Viz volume, and they would have, like, a list of, like, all the upcoming volumes and, like, all the recent volumes. And it was, like, a lot of stuff, and I was, like, always blown away.
Yeah.
But, like, it's really cool that, like, you were reading, like, One Piece volumes translated by Andy, and now you're working with him, like, years later, like, over a decade later.
That's definitely more than a decade.
And, like, on that, like, subject, so you were reading One Piece as when you were a kid. Was that your first Shonen Jump manga? What was your first exposure to Weekly Shonen Jump?
To be completely honest, I can't remember. You know, like, when there was 4Kids TV back then, and so, like, you had, Yu-Gi-Oh's, like, V-Jump or whatever, but, like, you had Yu-Gi-Oh!, you had One Piece, you had Shaman King, and then you had, like, the Toonami Black with, like, Kenshin. So, like, I knew a lot of the Shonen Jump titles individually, but, together, it wasn't really, like, apparent to me that there's something like Shonen Jump. I think around the time I was in 6th or 7th grade, my mom somehow bought a copy of Shoujo Beat magazine. But to be honest, when it came to the print magazine at the time that Viz was releasing itself, the only time I ever saw a print compiled version of it was at my doctor's office.
Wow.
Like, on the table, which is kind of sad to say, but I mean, my parents were never really big, like, magazine subscribers anyway, so hearing the name Shonen Jump came later, like, in terms of, like, the TV, like, not the TV, the internet and stuff like that. Like, oh, the internet taught me this, essentially. But for a long time, it was very like, oh, there's all these individual series that are on TV or in bookstores, and I guess you see the name Shonen Jump, like, on the spine, or it's not on the spine, there's the logo on the spine. Or, like, oh, it's on the C4. The Shonen Jump branding on the C4, and sometimes it's on the C1. And you're like, oh, yeah, Shonen Jump. but I don't really, like, at that time you didn't really know what it is. So I can't really say definitively, like, oh, this is what I knew exactly what Shonen Jump is. But, like, I knew a lot of Shonen Jump titles for almost as long as I liked anime and manga.
I think a lot of people start out that way. They get introduced to various different Shonen Jump series, and then later on, your like mind is blown when you're like, oh my god, One Piece, Naruto, and Dragon Ball all came from the same magazine? Whoa!
Yeah,
that was definitely my experience too.
Though admittedly, like, when it came to, like, actually sitting down and finishing, or catching up to One Piece, rather, admittedly, my influence to do that was, catching up in Gintama. Like, for weirdly, like, I kind of fell off the radar with some some Shonen Jump stuff and manga and anime, like, in my first year of college, and then a friend of mine was like, because I was actually reading a lot of Ichi-Jinsha titles. Like, I got copies of, Zero Sum, like, every month. Like, I was importing it. I got, Hakusensha's Lala every single month as well. Like, I was importing these magazines through Kinokuniya and reading those because I was actually really big on, like, josei and, and shoujo manga, specifically Natsume Yujincho. It's not obvious from my cat. And, and so I liked some Shonen Jump titles, like, as anime, like, as a lot of fans are like that. A lot of fans like Shonen Jump anime, not necessarily read manga. And so that was me for a while. Like, I liked, what was out at that time? I don't even remember. Like, I liked Nisekoi. Like, when I was introduced to Nisekoi through the anime, I was introduced to Kuroko's Basketball through the anime and, like, my Crunchyroll subscription and whatnot. In college, though, like, I got through Crunchyroll's run of Gintama, and I was like, oh, now I want to watch anime of One Piece. Sorry. I want to watch the anime of, I have a dog, the anime of One Piece, and I did. There was like 502 episodes at the time, and I did it.
Impressive.
And then I started reading the manga from there, and collecting also the earlier volumes, and that's where I was able to get stuff like copies that Andy translated, which I may or may not have stolen from the library, not intentionally. I just never brought them back. I don't know. They could have been from the library. I don't know.
That's okay. That happens sometimes. I think one time I thought I had lost a volume that I had borrowed from the library, and then I found it later. And, I honestly should have kept it because I had already paid the fine. But then I was like, this belongs to the library. I should return it, even though I already paid for it.
Oh, Sid, you good boy.
It was a One Piece Volume 2, which is a funny coincidence there.
Yeah.
But it was only recently that you kind of got up on One Piece then. Like, it's only a couple of years back. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I'm 3 years out of college? So 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. When I started reading the manga, they were around, sorry, my dog really wants attention. I feel so bad. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I totally understand that.
And so, what's it called? Maybe Fishman?
Yeah, 6 years ago, I feel like that would have been around Fish. Well, no, 6 years ago, I feel like would have been around, definitely like post time skip for sure.
Yeah, it was either Fishman or Punk Hazard. I can't remember which one.
When I graduated high school, they were in the middle of Dressrosa. And that was in 2013, so...
I feel old.
Yeah, it's crazy how much time flies.
Yeah, no, I'll be at Viz for 3 years in February.
Congratulations!
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, I was in Japan a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I lived in Japan 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Wait, it's been that long?
Yeah, it's really impressive to me that you've been working at Viz for 3 years and you have worked on so many series in that time. And even before you started working at Viz, like during your college years, you had like a very impressive background. You were a film studies major and you interned for both Anime's News Network and Tezuka Productions. What made you decide to become a manga editor and work for Viz?
How do you want me to start at the beginning or okay, once upon a time, no. So actually when I started college, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer. So, I was studying international relations, which required Japanese language, or not Japanese language, it required a foreign language, and I had already taken Japanese for like a year or two, and I continued it in college. So I was already having Japanese language study as a thing, and at the same time, I had always had an interest in like film and writing, specifically screenwriting, and was my main focus as a film studies major. Screenwriting and film theory, which a lot of film students hate. I loved it, but I also was the weirdo who really liked to write papers. So, continuing from there, I kind of had an interest, I had a weird sick obsession with why Hollywood films could not adapt manga and anime into successful live-action films. Like, up until that point, you had the Dragon Ball movie, you had, the Speed Racer film, like these films that were like, had a pretty popular niche following, but at the same time, they just were missing the mark entirely. And so, I was kind of interested in like, why these titles, especially Dragon Ball, you'd think that they just didn't know what to do with it or whatever. So, I spent a lot of time on that kind of stuff in college, and later on, like, my thesis ended up being about that specifically. And, I wrote 2 screenplays at the time as well, and all that stuff. So I'd already had that kind of interest, and actually I got really into that when I was studying abroad in Tokyo. I studied abroad in Tokyo and Kyoto. And, so at the same time though in college, I was actually, people don't know, I am a cosplayer, and I used to cosplay a lot more when I was, in school. And I cosplayed for companies such as Viz, Funimation, and my God. And, sorry, my dog's like destroying a roll of paper towels, and I'm like stopping him and telling a story. And so, I'm so sorry. And so I had already met a lot of people that way, and I had already started making connections that way. And obviously when you're a second or third year in college, you need to start coming up with internships for when you can build up your resume and whatnot. So I applied for Anime News Network, and I think something like they forgot to notify me that I got the internship. So I was actually already an intern at a film studio in Los Angeles, reading screenplays, which my background. And I was also working for Anime News Network at the time, and I continued doing my internship actually while I was studying in Japan. I came back, and I was fortunate enough in 2014 to get an internship at Tezuka Productions, assisting a producer there. And that was an amazing experience. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. I believe, though, that I'm like the only American to ever work at that office, and I also believe that I'm the youngest person. I was like 22 at the time.
Wow.
To ever actually like have any sort of position in that company. And that was amazing. I had met people in the Japanese industry that I never thought I would have a chance in like a million years meeting. I had already met, so there's somebody else I'd already become acquainted with. I think he was a producer at Sunrise. I met an animator and a director at Tatsunoko Productions, who, at the time, I was, super obsessed with, Suritama and Gatchman Crowds, and, that was funny because it was, my first day at Tezuka, and we were having lunch, hey, do you like Tatsunoko stuff? I'm like, oh yeah, no, I like Gatchman. And they're like, oh, do you want to have, dinner tomorrow with, somebody from Tatsunoko? I'm like, are you joking? Is this for real? And they're like, yeah, no, it's okay. And so, I was really fortunate to like make all these connections, and I already had my connections from cosplay for Viz. And so fast forwarding after Japan, I come back home, I need a job because I'm graduating college, and my friend contacts me. She works at Viz now, Charlene. And she was like, oh, Viz is looking for a new editor. Would you be like interested in applying? I'm like, yeah, sure. And a few months later, I was moving to San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like, sorry, I'm bad at telling stories, but
No, that was like an amazing story. You've had a really impressive career, and it's like amazing that you were like the youngest intern at Tezuka Productions.
I believe I was their only intern ever. I got that through a very specific like connection. Like that's not something that you could just like usually wake up and do. So yeah, no, that was a very specific case, and it was an amazing opportunity. I'm really happy I got it. So, yeah.
That is amazing.
They're great.
Not a lot of people can say, like, especially like people in the West in America can say that they've interned for Tezuka Productions or worked for them. And also not a lot of people can say that an anime character was inspired by them. So do you want to kind of go into that story that you've mentioned before, that a character in Gatchman Crowds was inspired by you when you met with people from Tatsunoko?
Yeah. So after I met people at Tatsunoko Productions, so you might have heard of Facebook before.
No, not really.
No, never heard of it. Yeah. So they were my friends on Facebook, and my Twitter is one thing, my Facebook is a completely different thing because it's private. And so, me being me and having the gift of Photoshop, I'm like obsessed with Sugita Tomokazu, which is like not a secret. But
You
I
are
at the
in such
same time,
good company.
I love
him too.
And so him and Tatsune are like, oh my god, they're perfect. Anyway, so what the heck? Anyways, so I have a lot of, like, there's this, it was very obvious that I really like Sugita Tomokazu, especially from my Facebook. Like, to the point where, like, I have this, I'll show you guys privately, but, like, I photoshopped, like, the Little Mermaid splash with, Sugita from that commercial where he's a dog and then he becomes naked. And so, obviously, like, they knew that, like, I had, like, some messed up obsession with him. Anyway, so I got, like, a text message around my birthday that was like, happy birthday, like, we're gonna have a character that's, like, for your birthday made after you. And I'm like, okay, like, that's really cool. Like, oh my god. And I didn't really know what that entails. Like, I'd seen some character designs of it, and the character was, the name, honestly escapes me, but I have...
Gel Sadora.
Yes.
Is the name of the character.
And so, like, the small girlish form, like, was sort of based off, I guess, my style and whatnot. The male form, however, my friend caught that episode when he transforms before me, and I get this message, it was like, you were responsible for Sugita and Gatchman Crowds. And I was like, wait, what? And so I went and watched, I'm like, oh my god, like, this happened. So yeah, Sugita was in Gatchman Crowds because of me and my sick obsession with him.
And it wasn't a one-off character either. It was like a recurring character in that season.
No, it was like not a one-off character. It was a main character. Yeah, I was like, oh my god. So yeah, no, that was interesting.
So I've never seen Gatchaman Crowds. So just let me like make sure we're on the same page. So is he voicing a character because like
my obsession with him? Yeah.
Because you meant, I thought you mentioned, unless I heard you wrong, you mentioned something about a male form or something.
Yeah, so the character starts out as like this cute girl. It's almost like a girl. I forgot who voices that version of him. It's it might have been Kuzumiya Rie, but I'm not sure.
I mean that would probably make sense.
Yeah, it was either her, or like not Ryoko Shirai. She's the other big one. Kano, whatever her name is. So it was like
Kana Hanazawa.
Yeah, that one. I was like, that one. So it was like a girl originally, and like the short shorts and like that kind of style. It was very much like like the pose, one of the poses like was like pretty much like the picture I took with the director. That's a private picture from when I visited the studio. And so like there's that form, and then later the character runs for like president of the world or whatever. Actually, I might be mixing that up with Samurai Flamenco, but like runs for some sort of political office, and in the process somehow, I don't really remember, it's been a few years, transforms into a man voiced by Sugita.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. I have to watch this show now.
It's like overall, this is season 2. Season 1 was a little bit different. I met the voice actor of the character I cosplayed as randomly in the middle of the street in Tachikawa. But I have a lot of weird stories of like, I've met this person randomly in this place. So, I was in the same room as Sugita Tomokazu. I was in a hallway with Ono Kensho, and he was glaring at me. Yeah, I've been in the same room as Sugita a few times. I've seen him live a few times.
Wow,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, here's me, where like, I was sick at Jump Festa like 3 years ago. I'm wearing this mask, and like, Andy like clearly saw that I was like smiling behind it. Or there was another time where we were actually at Jump Festa. I walked into somebody because I have really bad eyesight, and he was like, "Who did you just walk into?" And it was Suda Kenjiro, who's Kaiba. So I was like, "I just walked into Kaiba."
What?
I just walked into Kaiba.
God.
Yeah, no. He's just like, "Why?" So yeah, no, I have a lot of weird stories about people I've walked into.
Man,
That's amazing.
Man, those are like both actors I love too.
Yeah, no, and then right afterwards I like messaged my friend Eve. I'm like, Eve, I just walked into Suda. So
You've met a lot of awesome people.
yeah, no, I have a long list of people I've met.
Like I simultaneously both love and hate you at the same time. That's
sorry.
amazing.
Yeah. And I've met a handful of mangakas from like Jump Festa and Jump Festa interviews. We talked about it on the podcast. We met with Oda Sensei. It's my second time meeting Oda Sensei. I've met Kishimoto Sensei twice now. Horikoshi Sensei once. Oh my god, Toma. And like Kagami Sensei twice. I don't know. I don't remember. A lot of people. There's been a lot of people that I have run into in life.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I wish I had your life. That sounds awesome.
My life, like, outside of that is just, like, sitting and playing games and yelling at my TV, so...
But that's a lot of fun, too.
Yeah,
I see, that doesn't sound all that bad either. I mean, I like sitting around and doing whatever, playing games sometimes. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So listeners at home, the next time you watch Gatchman Crowds, keep in mind that Gelisadora was inspired by Marlene and her love for Tomokazu Sugita.
Yep. I just pulled a muscle in my arm. I'm sorry. My dog is now eating the table.
It sounds like he's hungry.
I fed him, like, his meal and then, like, 2 meat sticks. So I don't know. Maybe he needs like a third meat. That sounds so wrong. Oh my god.
What a hungry dog.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Hey, we're no strangers to innuendos on this podcast.
Yeah, it's totally cool.
I had a friend who like, I forgot how this came up, but she's just like, I don't really know. Like my nickname was Michi as a cosplayer. So like, I don't know like what Michi likes outside of balls and Sugita. So. Yeah.
But speaking of cosplaying, I'm interested. You said that you were a professional cosplayer and you did cosplay shoots for Viz and some other companies. This is the first time I've heard about that. What is that kind of like?
So I cosplayed through a place called a site called AC Paradise, which is like. It's a place where a lot of cosplayers upload pictures of their cosplay, but they also have connections to other like actual companies and will work with companies to have cosplayers pretty much volunteer for events. I wouldn't really call it professional cosplay. No one really gets paid for that, but you get like a badge. Sometimes you get a hotel room depending on how long you are working. And I luckily was having an internship in Los Angeles for that film studio, and Viz was doing K Project in 2013, and at Anime Expo, and so I was cosplaying as the kid with the skateboard, I forgot his name, from K Project for them, and then it was like such a great time that I went to San Diego, last second San Diego Comic Con 2 weeks later, cosplaying Aladdin from Moggy for, I think, the manga announcement. So
nice.
Yeah, and that's how I really got acquainted with people at Viz. But yeah, I'm like too old and tired to do that now. But it's like actually pretty hard. Like you have to wear the costume for like 8 hours and stand around and do whatever the company is doing. Like sometimes it's like a big event or a stage thing or whatever. And I did it for a lot of companies, like Aniplex, Funimation, Viz. My last two I ever did, I think, were for Daisuke, and Axis. Yeah, Axis. I always get Atlas and Axis mixed up, and I'm like, oh yeah, Atlas is the one with Persona 5, and Axis is the one with the fighting games with Sugita. So, literally, like, Blaze Blue for me in a nutshell.
Very interesting. Hey, cosplay can lead to careers.
I think, like, if you... I wouldn't recommend, like, going up to companies in your cosplay, being like, hire me. Like, I have a very specific background. But, I mean, in the end of the day, networking, no matter what your industry is, isn't gonna hurt you.
Yep.
Don't be obnoxious about it, but, like, networking is networking. It's the same for any other job. Networking is what got me to where I am, knowing the right people, being in the right place. But, like, at the same time, like, when I was working for Viz, for example, I was able to show off, like, hey, I have, like, a pretty good work ethic. Like, I was never late. I took it seriously. I didn't mess around. And as I think, like, with, like, cosplaying as well, a lot of people might not necessarily, like, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm cosplaying right now, so I'm supposed to have fun. But if you're gonna do something like that, and ACP is really great. I'm still friends with, like, Henry and people who organize that stuff. Like, if you're gonna want to do stuff like that, just in general, overall, like, take it seriously. It's not something to mess around with. Like, you're there to do a job. So, yeah. I mean, if you're doing any task, it never hurts to do it to the best you can do it.
Mm-hmm. That's very good advice. When you get your foot in the door, show off your work ethic and make connections, and who knows where that can lead you. And in your case, it led you to become a manga editor at Viz.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. What are the responsibilities of a manga editor? What does a manga editor do?
So I think you can think of me as like a project manager almost, who edits grammar and a lot of other things. So if I get a new title, I have to hire freelance translator and letterer to make sure that the translation is, like, coherent in proper English and proper Japanese, which, like, I was talking to somebody earlier, like, translators are great, but sometimes, like, there's always a mistake. So it helps knowing Japanese, and so I check the Japanese pretty carefully as well. And then I send that to a letterer. The letterer does the lettering. The letterer sends it back to me, and then I check over the lettering, whether it's a Shonen Jump chapter. The lettering could be as simple as a letter. Somewhere's going to be mad at me for calling it simple. Could be as simple as text placement and subtitled sound effects, or it could be as complex as redrawn sound effects. And sometimes, like, an error to me could be either, like, a word is spelled wrong, or I think, like, a sound effect could be better, so I can change the whole sound effect, or the placement, if it's retouched, sometimes it's covering something that shouldn't be covered, or, like, might be a little bit over a character's eye, and that can't happen. So you check for, like, the big details, the small details, or even, like, if you're looking at text in a script, and you're like, oh, this sounds fine, and then you actually see it laid out, the flow between, like, if you're breaking up a sentence or whatever, it doesn't read as well as you thought it did when it was just on paper. Like, you could change that. So you end up doing that, and you hand it off, and that goes through more rounds of corrections, and then you quality check the book, and yeah. So that's, like, the main task, is pretty much getting a book done from start to finish. And then always keeping eyes out on stuff that's popular, stuff like that. So, yeah, pretty much that's what we do.
Excellent. So you're basically like making sure that the book reads like the best it can, like everything flows like very well into each other and like there's no continuity mistakes and like spelling mistakes, like making sure the like entire product of the book just like reads and is presented like the best way possible.
Yeah, like what I really like about Viz is that I think that our manga is like one of the best English adaptation like version that you can get of anything, really. Viz manga in general, I think, has a great reputation of being incredibly high quality, and like our attention to detail and our workflow and the amount of care that goes into every book on every level is like astounding. So it's like the editor's job is to make sure that it is the best that it can be, and everybody else who looks at it and helps along the way. Also, like the designers are all really amazing. We get our stuff in on time and stuff like that. Like everything is, the whole process I think is really great to make the product the best it can be.
Mm-hmm. I think those efforts really show. I do agree. Like, Viz books are definitely really high quality, and I'm always very satisfied with how they turn out. But I was wondering, like, what some of the differences and some of the challenges are in editing, like, simulpublished manga for, like, the digital Shonen Jump and the graphic novels. Like, what are, like, the differences in the process of doing those?
So obviously the biggest difference is the time frame. A book would be like, I get the book, I get like the translation, that takes like a month and then another month and like 2 months to be lettered and like a month or two of corrections and like so it's like a long time. Like it could be like a year for me to see a physical copy of the book. Shonen Jump is about like a week. Free section could end up being shorter. I've had really, really, really fast turnarounds on Dragon Ball Super, especially. It could be like 48 hours.
Wow.
At times. And that's unusual, but, we do what we do to make it simul.
That's an incredible time pressure.
And so that's the biggest, is the time. Also, like, the big difference is, obviously, since we're putting it out so quickly, we don't retouch everything. In the weekly version, you can see that in the magazine, you can see that in the free section pretty easily. We don't retouch sound effects, so that's another big thing. Personally, I like being able to see, like, my work done, and in, like, a final-ish, it's not final, because when it goes to GNs, like, whether it be digital or print, like, there's still always something, like, Elder, for example, like, we have it digital, so our digital book, it's not retouched, but, like, sit there and go through the proofs again and make all the corrections because things do slip by, especially in that amount of time. And so, or like in Astra, for example, like I'm sitting there and like, maybe I want to phrase this differently or whatever. So, yeah, like the big ones are like what gets lettered and the timing. I think that's the biggest, and obviously the timing would be the biggest challenge. Also like who's involved, and stuff like that I guess people who are readers don't necessarily see all that. Sometimes, like, I actually have, like, a different retouch person than the actual, like, weekly letter. Toriko is a good example of that, where the person who does the retouch is not the same person who did the lettering, because letters can be really busy. And I have that letter actually on Haikyuu, and that's, like, one a month. Haikyuu is a very specific case, though, of, like, one book a month.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's like pretty fast work. Like, once a book is done, like the next one has to be out in the following month. I imagine it's not like nearly as crazy as like the One Piece and Naruto speed ups back in the day.
I don't even
like,
want to think about it.
Still like a lot of work.
I wasn't in Viz obviously during that time, so I can't really say how that went. For me though, personally, like I'll say like I work on multiple volumes of not One Piece, Haikyuu at once. Like, I'll get a translation in, and while I'm getting a translation in, I'm getting a new proof, and I'm doing corrections on 2 volumes, and then I'm handing off one, and then I'm also going through blue lines at the same time, but also the previous month blue lines. So I could be working on, like, 4 or 5 volumes of Haikyuu at once.
Wow.
And it gets confusing sometimes. Like, if you're, like, for example, where the books are around now, in terms of what's hitting the shelves, the Shiratorizawa arc, I think started with either 17 or 18. Like, it gets confusing when you're working on, like, 17, 18, 19, 20 all at once. Or 20, actually 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, and 20, no, 23, I think it stops there. You start to get confused, like, you're like, oh, this was this volume, but this is also this volume, and, like, which one was this, and stuff like that. So, like, you start to get confused a little bit on what happened in which volume.
Would you say that's, like, the toughest part of your job is, like, working on, like, multiple volumes from, like, the same series at once? So, like, just multiple volumes of different series all at once in general and just trying to keep track of, like, the continuity?
I wouldn't call that tough, to be completely honest. I think I'm just used to it. Like, for example, I feel like there's probably someone somewhere who's like, oh, like, the weekly chapters are really hard, but, like, and I think it would be really hard to work on this because it's really fast. But at the same time, like, for me personally, since my experience in this has been doing the weekly chapters a lot or whatever, or Haikyuu for me is something that, like, I created the pacing for myself. Like, I didn't choose to do it monthly. I mean it more like I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to approach this kind of deadline. Because it's like, oh, you're doing this book every month. So how I get to decide, like, how I want to manage my own work on it kind of thing. I don't really find the time management too hard because I don't know any other way to do it. And also, like, I've always been really good about, like, doing my work early and in a timely manner. So I don't know, I wouldn't call that the biggest challenge. I don't know what is. I think the biggest challenge might be, like, there's some series that are just hard to work on. I'm not going to point to anything in specific, but there are some series where it's, like, a lot of work. And, like, it takes me a long time to get through books, and you'd be surprised, like, which ones take me a while. And it's just like, oh, this book is really detailed in the dialogue, or this book has a lot of, like, talking, and, like, it's hard to make sense of because it's, like, specific to that world. So I find, like, those kind of series series specifically might be really tough to work on. But I mean, it's not like a bad tough to work on, it's just a challenge. But you get through it and you get the final result and you're like, man, I did it.
Wow. You have an incredible work ethic to be able to, like, handle that much workload at once and, like, you know, say, oh, you know, I've set the pace for myself and, I can manage it. Like, I'm really impressed by that. I really admire that.
Yeah. Like, in terms of Haikyuu, like, I'm caught up. Like, so I mean, like, I did it. It's obviously, like, the books are still coming out, but in terms of, like, my work on it, like, for example, having surgery in a few weeks, I needed to get ahead. I got ahead.
Yeah.
And would you say that's, like, the most rewarding experience of being a manga editor is, like, when the book is finished and you can look at the final product and say, yeah, I worked on this, I completed this project, and I'm satisfied with it?
Yeah, no, I will say that that's incredibly rewarding. I really do like for example, when I got my first, like, copy of Astra Lost in Space Volume 1 back, I was like, oh my god, like, here it is. And, like, at that time, I'd already been working on the chapters for a really long time, but at the same time, when I got it in print, I was like, oh my god, here's the book, here it is, it's real. Let me pet it, like. So, yeah, no, I like having my books. It's fun.
That's really cool. One thing I also want to ask about is that part of your job involves researching potential new licenses. So I was wondering, what do you look for when choosing series to pitch as possible acquisitions?
I actually, honestly, personally haven't pitched anything recently. But it was always stuff that, like, I thought was good. I don't think I could get too big on specifics of this, to be completely honest.
That's totally fine.
It's like, oh, like, this seems like it's people like it or whatever. Or it could be like something is like dumb. Because I don't want to say like specific things that I've pitched that we didn't pick up. Like stuff that's like, oh, I really like this. Oh my god, Toma. It's like, or like, I really like this kind of thing. Like, I want to work on it. And so it could be something like that as well. Which is my selfish pitches.
I know you can't go into it, but I'm sure you must have been very excited when you found out you got to work on Astra.
Yeah. No, Astra was like, I'll say that I wanted to work on Astra. The thing is, like, personally speaking, when Sketch Dance ended, well, for starters, I will admit, and I told you, I never read the last volume of Sket Dance. I have a thing where, like, I don't like to read the last volume of things when it ends, because I just don't want it to end, so in my heart, Sket Dance goes on forever. I did that with Beelzebub, I've done that with, I did that with Kuroko. I never finished Kuroko, and my coworker makes fun of me for it, because I'm like, yeah, no, I love Kuroko, and we just fight about Kuroko. So, like, when Sket Dance, or I heard the Sket Dance, This Is It, I had my eye on news about, like, whenever he would come back.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really liked Astra when I was just reading it on Jump Plus. And I was obnoxious about how much I liked it. So, I'm pretty obnoxious about how much I like a lot of things. Like, to be completely honest, like, I do get scared. Like, you've seen me on Twitter. I like to fangirl about things that I personally like. Astra wasn't one that I was super open about liking at the time because I was, like, afraid. Even when, like, it wasn't on the radar or whatever, people were like, oh, she's secretly working on this thing or whatever because she likes it. Like, that's my, like, I've said, like, oh, yeah, no, I'm scared to fangirl.
No, because you know, you can't read manga for fun or anything.
Yeah, no, that's, like, I obviously do, but, like, I'm afraid that some people may not get that for whatever reason. Like,
yeah,
there's been no real case of that. I just, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my god, if I fangirl, like, this one Jump SQ manga that I really personally just like, people are gonna be like, oh, she's secretly working on it, even though just, like, I'm manga trash and I really like manga. That I like to fangirl manga. Like,
yeah, that must be pretty difficult to deal with, honestly. Like, if I were in your position, I don't know. Like, I probably wouldn't be able to deal with that. That would be... Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just getting, like, pestered about, like, a series that you're reading, like, people asking, oh, are you going to be working on this? And you have to be like, no, I'm just reading it for fun.
Yeah, like, for example, I obviously like Blue Flag. My dog's named after a character in Blue Flag, and I'm pretty open that, like, oh my god, I love this manga. And, like, when people are like, oh, is whatever, like, it's maybe not just Blue Flag, but, like, a lot of people ask me, like, oh, like, what is happening with this series or whatever, this series or whatever. And, like, I think, like, the biggest, like, fan to professional transition I've been through is, like, okay, I am a fan, but I'm also professional, so it's, like, there's stuff that I like, but then there's also people who are aware that it's my job, so it's, like, they don't necessarily, some people won't separate the two when it comes to, that. So yeah, like, I read manga for fun. I love manga for fun. I love my Jump Plus stuff. I sit there and read Jump Plus for fun all the time. It may not necessarily be something I work on. So yeah, Jump Plus actually I think is a great platform overall. So
to talk about, like, when you do talk about manga, like, on Twitter or, like, like, stuff you are working on, like, I think, like, it was very cool, like, you would, like, comment on the new Astra chapters, like, in the comment section, and, like, have interactions, like, with fans. I thought, like, that was, like, really fun, like, to see, like, the person working on this series, like, is just as excited for it and also, like, making these predictions. And, you know, it was cool to have that conversation in, like, the comic sections and, like, you know.
Yeah, I can talk about that. At first, I really, like, didn't intend to comment so much, because if you look at other parts of the site, like, I'm not too active in the comment section, like, in the issue, or sometimes in the podcast, but it's in very, very specific cases, that I won't go into. And so, like, Astra was more like, oh yeah, no, I really want people to read this, and so I'm gonna spam, like, every part of this, like, the website everywhere, being like, everybody read Astra, and I would do it in the issue. Anytime in the issue an Astra chapter came out, I'd be like, everybody go read Astra, because, like, I legitimately like this manga. And, like, I started also, like, with Dragon Ball Super, but, like, chapter Dragon Ball Super, and I did it with Elden Live as well. But Astra, I started noticing people, I started noticing two things. I started noticing people, like, actually having really interesting theories, and I'm like, oh my god, because, like, here I am in emails while we're working on it. Like, I theorized with Annalisa, I theorized with, the translator, I theorized with, like, even, I probably bothered Andy. Like, the whole time, like, yeah, no, like, and from the beginning, I was even, like, and you guys probably know too, like, I thought it was Shars, like, the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, he's too Shars. So,
He was too shiny, too sparkly.
Yeah, he was too perfect. No. And, like, there was multiple times I'd go back to chapter 1 and, like, try to find something. And it really pissed me off. It was there. It was there the whole time.
Yeah, I know. Like, when I was rereading, like, the series, like, I was, like, on the lookout for, like, all the, like, clues and hints about, like, Charge was the traitor. And, yeah, like, you read in chapter 1 and you, like, look at, like, some of these details and, like, yeah, he was ahead of the group the whole time.
Yeah, and I was actually, like, looking at volume 2 again, obviously, because I had to edit it, and, like, there's, like, a whole part where it's like, oh, like, Shars and Ares are really similar in their personalities. It's almost like they're related. Like, there's, like, an actual line that's like that. And I was just, like, looking at it, I'm like, oh, shit. Like, oh, my God. Like, that's a thing.
I'm pretty sure Charles wears a t-shirt, like, literally with the name of the country he's from or whatever. At some point.
Yeah, he has a Vixia shirt really early on, and it didn't really have much context. I mean, like, in the context of, like, a lot of the Astra clothing, for example, a lot of the brands, like Hyperion.
Yeah.
Since you read Sketan.
Yeah, I definitely recognize that.
It's like, oh yeah, no, I know what that is. And stuff like that. So, I mean, at first, those kind of details, even Falcon, I think, was also related, like, another one of those games that the teacher played with them. Or one of the things that they had to shout out while playing that game. That was always so funny. Yeah, like, in the context of Astra, like, the t-shirt was really, like, a hidden thing. I thought it was, like, one of those, just like, oh, he wrote Vixia on a shirt. But yeah, when it came to the comment section, I saw people commenting. I also saw people commenting on things as though they were their theories, and it was really clear that it was them reading Jump Plus and stuff like that. So at some point, I kind of became also like a moderator of the discussion. Like, I was self-moderating, because I really, it bothered me when people were like spoiling it for other people. I do it for Dragon Ball Super too. Dragon Ball Super's comment section.
Yeah, that's just not right.
Yeah. No, Dragon Ball Super's comment section, I will check it and I'll be like, oh, are people talking about the anime? Because the anime is further than the manga, and I'll be like...
And that's hard because the anime is so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't think about that, and just, like, as a courtesy, I'll change it as a spoiler, and I'll be like, oh, please in the future... just mark your anime discussion as spoiler so that people who haven't watched it don't get spoiled. Like, I bought a box of senzu beans and I got spoiled for the Tournament of Power, so I was so sad about that.
I'm impressed that you have managed to avoid so many spoilers as you have when it comes to Super.
Yeah, I've never been that big on, like, Tumblr or, like, Reddit or anything like that, so I've been always really good about avoiding spoilers. Like, for example, when, not The Last Jedi or whatever, the one that, like, The Force Awakens, I avoided spoilers in that completely until I saw it.
Wow.
Persona 5, I've avoided every spoiler so far, and I'm not done with it. So I'm actually really good about avoiding spoilers. That's because I'm, like, kind of a hermit and don't really check on things as much as I should when it comes to, like, discussions on things that I like. Like, yeah, Tumblr's not really been my thing. Reddit's not really my thing. I don't really watch YouTube. Like, the only thing on YouTube that I watch is, like, cooking videos of stuff I'm never gonna actually cook. So like,
I know that feel.
Yeah, so that's, like, really it.
Yeah, I follow too many people who aren't afraid to spoil. I haven't seen Devilman Crybaby yet, but I know almost everything about it because of people on Twitter.
Like, people will not shut up about that right now.
Like, I think I, like, revenge spoiled Final Fantasy 15 for people. Like, I forgot what was happening at the time, but there was, I think, Yuri on Ice. Yuri on Ice was running at the time. All these people just would spoil it right away, and they'd get really, like, whatever, and then the same people would be like, do not spoil Final Fantasy 15 for me. And I was just like, well, you spoiled Yuri on Ice for me, so I'm gonna write this whole post about what happens in Final Fantasy at 15, and my friends got so mad, and I was just like, well, F you, because, like, you spoiled this for me, so here's my thing, and this is exactly how it feels.
You just reminded me of a really funny tweet I found the other day about how, just kind of talking about My Hero Academia for a second, where I saw a tweet somebody made about how they engaged with somebody about tweeting My Hero Academia spoilers and told them, asked them nicely, hey, you should not do that. And then the person they asked responded with, "This is how I cope." I thought that was the funniest shit.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, the lengths that people will go to justify talking about all this stuff early, but yeah, that's a whole other thing.
But to steer the conversation back to Astra, I just have one more question I'd like to ask you. You've mentioned before that Sket Dance is one of your favorite manga, and Kenta Shinohara is one of your favorite mangaka. So I want to ask you how you discovered Sket Dance and what makes Shinohara's work so appealing to you. And did you have to approach working on Astra with a different mindset as an editor than you would have as a fan? And has your perception of Shinohara changed in any way now that you've worked on one of his works in a professional capacity?
So I discovered Sket Dance actually through Gintama,
yeah,
how everything else is.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Was it still the crossover episode?
No, so Gintama's anime when I watched it was ending, and Sket Dance's actually was beginning. So it was before that. It was on Crunchyroll, and so I would watch Gintama and then I would watch Sket Dance. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is fun. And then as I watched more and more of it, I'm like, oh my god, I really like this. And so I started actually reading it out of the Japanese magazine, and I was buying tankobons. I bought the novels, and Shinohara Sensei's writing in Sket Dance, if you're reading Astra, really did set the groundwork for the more serious tone of Astra. And a lot of people look at Sket Dance and oh, it's just a really, really funny series, but yes, it's a hilarious series. It's hilarious. I've watched it just for the sake of needing a good laugh, but I have cried reading and watching Sket Dance. I've cried.
You are not the only one.
A bit. It was really sad. I landed in Kyoto when I was studying there, and I turned on my TV, and it was it was part of the Happy Birthday arc. And I was just oh my god, this is the first thing I see when I land in Japan. Great. Cause here it is, it's the Happy Rebirthday arc. It's oh, by the way, Bosun, you're not alone. Here's your brother. And I'm oh my god, Tsubaki. So
look, I totally get that. I actually I own volume 32 of Sket, which is the very last one, and I won't say anything because I just remember you haven't actually read the last volume, so you haven't seen the final arc yet. But so suffice to say that the resolution of a certain character always. I always have the urge to just go back to volume 32 and just kind of flip through it and just cry for 10 minutes and then put it down. Just the ending of Sket Dance in general I would say is very satisfying, but, we talked about on the podcast last episode that, a particular part of the final stretch of Sket Dance was resolved very nicely, I think, and that's pretty much why I'm here for the series. And after that, I don't care as much what happens afterwards, because the thing I was invested in the most, was resolved very nicely, and that's all I could ever ask for. So. Yeah,
for Sket Dance, I'll say, almost every character arc, was it Switch? Sorry.
Yeah, you guessed
the
it.
Switch and Momoka thing for the whole time. I just wanted them to be happy.
I know.
I was just I wanted Switch to Switch with his brother. The whole thing just made me so sad, and his whole character just made me so sad.
Yeah.
And Momoka loved him so much, and I don't know how that resolves, but I really wanted it to be okay.
I really wish you had already read the last volume, because, man, we had a really good discussion last episode about the final arc, and which, personally, I think
I might now do that,
because it's really good, and again, I won't say anything in particular, but there were certain themes that Shinohara visited in Astra that I was that I guess I wasn't like surprised that I was glad to see that he revisited again from Sket Dance. Just certain plot beats and revelations and whatnot carried over into Astra that I thought were very nice to see.
I'm very curious because it like in Sket Dance, I did look up a little bit of spoilers. Like my understanding of some of the endings was maybe a lot of the characters who had interests in each other like didn't really end up together, or like overtly end up together, in the sense that like in Astra, like these two different couples like were either getting married or got married. So like the Balsoon Himeko relationship was really great. Honestly though, my favorite thing, like my favorite like that part of manga, like the relationship part of manga for Sket Dance for me was not the actual relationship between Agata's sister and Bassoon, but like whatever went on in Agata's head. I loved how it like just spiraled out of control. It's like, okay, well now Tsubaki is actually with her, but wait, now Michiru has like this like secret late relation. I'm just like, Agata, get a grip, please. Agata was, I think, in the end, my favorite character.
He's pretty good, yeah.
But yeah, no. What made Shinohara Sensei's, well, here, so he is one of my favorite mangaka, if not my favorite. Him and Sorachi Sensei are like the top.
You're making me so happy
obviously,
right now.
he obviously was the assistant to Sorachi Sensei, so their like style is similar. Gintama also has the very big like, this is hilarious until it makes you cry, and so I discovered it through Gintama, but then also what makes it appealing is his ability to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna make you laugh so hard that you cry, but I'm also gonna make it so that like you legitimately cry because it's so sad and emotional and moving. And obviously, like, I have a bias towards like twin characters, so I mean, I was on Team Tsubaki because he was the younger twin, but yeah, no, it's really funny, actually. In the manga, they're both born in 1992 on, like, November either 21st or 22nd.
November 2nd, I think, actually.
No, it's, like, 20-something. I'm, like, 100% sure it's the 22nd. I have Google. Hold on.
I mean, the Google is a very powerful weapon. Tsubaki.
Yeah. Oh, November 11th.
Oh,
so they're
okay,
exactly,
okay. We were both wrong.
This in our Sket Dance review. Bassoon shares the same birth date as me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Okay. We were both wrong.
So it's November 11th, 1992. Yeah. I'm November 18th, 1992. So in my head, I'm like, oh, they're like a week older than me. Like in real life.
Bassoon is exactly 3 years older than me, since I was born in 1995 and he was born in 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, Bassoon is like a year older than I am or so.
I'm older than both of you. Yeah, so I'm the same age as those two, except like a week younger. And so I don't know, like their birthday being close to mine, the fact that they're both twins, like really spoke. The fact that they're twins that don't really get along, was a big plus to me. I don't really like it how every twin story is like, these two characters are best friends forever, and I'm like, looking at myself and my own identical twin, I'm like, we're not best friends forever. This isn't realistic at all. So I did like that Tsubaki and Balsoon weren't like they had their moments, like they're really funny moments. One I'm specifically thinking of is like, they were walking home or something, and they both had umbrellas, and they had to fight somebody, and they were yelling really stupid like attack names while they were fighting them with their umbrellas. Yeah, I was just like, okay, this is hilarious. I love this. And I did like that their relationship grew to the point where it was like an awkward friendship almost. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't ever like, we're just gonna be the exact same character now. To be completely honest, the last part of Sket Dance I remember is when they all turned into Ikemen characters.
Yeah.
When they had the Ikemen drink or whatever from what's
Chuma.
his face? Chuma, because Chuma was in was an Astra.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty great.
I saw that. I was like, oh my god, it's Chuma. Also, the reporter at the end kind of looked like Switch.
Huh,
it wasn't
I didn't
Switch. I was
that.
like hoping that his name was like Kazuyoshi or something like that, but it was yeah, like the same glasses and hairstyle. Like I was like, oh, it looks like Switch. And Basun kind of looks like, not Basun, Kanata kind of looks like if like Basun and like Kato had like a weird genetic baby, like genetically modified baby that the two of them were the parents or something. Like he had that like Kato kitty like physique with like Basun's like everybody listens to me for some reason like character. Because everybody listened to Basun for some reason.
Yeah, Kanata, you know what, I tweeted about this too, like what keeps him from being like Basun 2.0 is that he's actually like physically capable of stuff and he's kind of an athlete, so.
Yeah. It's like, he's actually like, oh, he says dumb things, but like he actually can do stuff and has actually like saved the lives of people through his athletic skill and not having like the Himeko character or the Switch character do stuff. I mean, there has been moments where it's like, oh, Zach, go do this thing, or like, Sharks, teach us about biology, or whatever, but, like, it's not like he has another character fighting for him, because in the case of Sket Dance, Basun had Himeko fighting for him a lot. I loved Himeko.
Himeko's great.
So.
But no, yeah, it seems like you've been a fan of Sket Dance for a while and just a fan of Shinohara's work in general, which, you know, we can totally understand. Like, obviously, you know, I don't think I talked about this on the Sket Dance episode, but like, Sket Dance I had seen around for like a year or two, like a little while. Like I would see it around, I would see people mention it. And I had heard that, like, oh yeah, this guy used to work for Sriracha or whatever. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I saw the crossover episode, or whatever. And I just never got around to it. But then, I think I finished when I got into Gintama, all there was basically the first series, the first like 200 episode run or whatever. And then there was the run from 2011 to 2012. So the anime was about 250 episodes at the time. And at the time, like, the anime would be gone for like 2 years or something. So when I finally caught up to Gintama at the time, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? I feel so empty. Cause that was what I was obsessed with for like 6 months or whatever. And then I saw Sket Dance had an anime on Crunchyroll and I'm like, okay, whatever, I guess I'll just watch this thing. It's kind of like Gintama, I think. And then I watched all the anime and then I read pretty much all the manga after that. And yeah, Sket Dance became pretty much one of my favorite manga of all time. Again, we had a whole podcast about it. So if you haven't listened to that, people can go listen to that. But no, yeah, I love Shinohara's work. And ever since I finished Sket Dance, like, you know, I was so happy to see that not only was Shinohara doing more stuff, that it was picked up by Viz of all things. Like, I never would have thought that, like, that I would ever see anything from Shinohara officially in English. So, like, I do kind of have to thank you and Viz for that, because that is pretty amazing, honestly.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I actually said it, but like, I had kept an eye out for his name being like Shinohara Sensei new series, like anywhere for as long as the series, like Sket Dance had been over. And obviously, like, I was looking forward to it, and I'm like, oh, now I'm a manga professional, what happens if I can work on it? And like, and part of your question was also like approaching it as a fan versus whatever. I liked Haikyuu before I started working on it. I liked Seraph before I started working on it. I liked Toriko before I started working on it, and whatever, like a bunch of series that I worked on, I liked it before I started working on it. I'd say, like, just in general, like, liking something maybe makes it easier to work on. Like, I've never, like, I'm wondering if it's coming, like, the question comes from a place of, like, has there ever been, like, a tough decision you had to make, like, your fan gut says this, but your professional gut says this, or whatever. I've never really run into a case like that. When it comes to just working on manga, it's just kind of like there is a way to just do it. And I don't really have like any sort of like internal struggle about like the right, like what my heart says or whatever. There was one line in Astra though that my translator gave me. It had nothing to do with like being a fan of Shinohara Sensei. It was just like such a ridiculous like rewrite that like I couldn't change it. I was just like, Andy, you make the mark to change this because I don't want to. It was like that kind of like ridiculous like joking around kind of almost thing, but it had nothing to do with being a fan. It was just the line was so ridiculous. And like, it made me laugh. I was like, man, I hope no one like changes it kind of thing. Like, it was changed, but we were all thinking it at the same time. Yeah. But yeah, I never really had like the whole like, I'm a fan and I want it to go like this, but professionally I think it should be like this. Usually, like, I speak Japanese. There's just times where I'm like, okay, like, it's usually when that comes to that, it's more like, okay, it should be like this kind of thing. It's, like, I'll say, like, for example, Dragon Ball Super localization stuff, like, I'll read something and I'll be like, okay, I really believe it should be like this because Japanese-wise, this is what this says, and in English, doesn't make sense. Like, something like that. That's where it becomes weird, and it's not really like a fan struggle. It's more like I read Japanese and I also read English, and this just probably makes more sense in English. So yeah, there's never been like a fan professional struggle for Astra or anything I really work on. It's not really like that. Maybe, personally, I've never had the problem, but I think a lot of people might be like, oh yeah, no, like, making this move sound like this or whatever. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what I'm really saying. I've never really had that.
That's alright.
And I'm trying to think of examples of like ways that somebody could, but to be completely honest, I can't think of a way. Like, there's just a way to edit manga, and that's just the way I do it. It has nothing to do with either, like, I could totally just be working on something that is just work and not necessarily like Astra levels of love. And I'll work on it just as hard. So like, it's not like, oh, I worked on Astra harder because I love it more. It's like I work on Astra just as hard as anything else I work on. And if it's something I don't necessarily like as much as Astra, like Astra is like top at the top for me. It just is like a personal ranking. But if something below that or whatever, like, I love Haikyuu, and I worked on Haikyuu just as much as Astra, kind of thing. Like, I work on everything as hard as, like, because it's not really about, like, how much I like something, it's about how good it can be in terms of the book that's put out. So, my like for something doesn't really affect, like, how hard I work on it.
I get that. You might love some of your babies more than others, but you treat them all the same.
Yes.
You gotta give all your products, like, the same level of quality no matter what anyway, so.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at. Like, I love Astra, and that's the only way I could think of, like, somebody being like, oh, maybe I try a little harder or whatever, but I approach everything the same way. Like, I've come up with weird, like, panicked, like, we need to ask about this because it needs to be perfect situations for things that, like, I'm not, like, die hard obsessed with. Like, I like everything I work on. I'll say that. But, like, there's obviously, like, tiers of how much I like something. Like, enough to name my dog or cat after it or whatever. My dog isn't named after the thing I work on, or neither is one of my cats. Like, I named my cat after, one of my cats is named after a character in Toriko. I really like Toriko. I did almost name my dog after a character in Astra, but I didn't.
What name were you gonna give?
I was thinking Luca.
Yeah, that sounds like a pet name.
Because at the time I didn't know if I was going to get like a male or female dog. I'd also considered Shars, but then I didn't want my dog to be named after a potential murderer.
Well, you made a good call there, although he does change a bit down the line.
Yeah, no, Shars does come around, but I didn't want to end up with like my arm missing or something, so.